Canberra has recently been named #1 city for quality of life by something called the Oxford Economics Unit. I'm not sure if it's actually attached to the university or just one of those things where they put something in the town so it sounds fancy, like Cambridge Analytica. Different missions, obviously. And I thought it's fun as not reigning, but a previous finalist nominee for ACT. What was it called? Local Hero of the Year as part of the Australian of the Year Awards. Yes, I was down to the top 4. So I'm basically the most important person to give you an opinion on this. I should say that year was so competitive and I only lost because of politics. The woman that won, actually, I hope you're watching this. I forgot your name, or maybe I never learnt it, but she won because she'd adopted and fostered 50 babies or something like that. Make of that what you will. Either way, it's hard to compete with. And so, as Australian of the Year Canberra royalty, I thought I'm well positioned. I actually write a lot in my own sort of doodlings about these rankings for most livable city and those sorts of things, because I'm interested in how we use quantitative metrics to get in the way of experiential stuff and overrule things that we actually know. So it's really nice that Canberra has now won one, because I feel uniquely well positioned to say why I think Canberra may controversially maybe isn't the place with the highest quality of life in the world, though it is very good. And I love Canberra. I'm on the record many times for talking about how great it is, but I think it's a great example for Canberra to win something like this, to sit back and reflect upon how do they choose these things? What is it that actually makes somewhere good? And kind of just like, a best meal in the world. Like, would there even be a best meal? No, because it depends. It depends not only on who you are, but it depends what you've been doing, what time of the year it is, where you are. Like, you could have the best pizza in the world, but if you're eating it after you just ate 2 bowls of the best beef vindaloo in the world, then maybe it's actually not that good at all, and you'd rather just have a lie down. And in the same way, Canberra, we can measure it for things like it's got a really high average income. It's got good access to nature. It's very safe. What else is great about Canberra? I like the architecture, but that's controversial. And again, like, the architecture in Canberra is great, but would you stand it up next to Venice? Probably not. I would, but I'm weird. And these sorts of metrics, they're actually not where you live your day-to-day life. Like, just sort of, for me, the fact that Canberra wins this stuff or does well is because these are games of averages, and Canberra, by circumstance, just purely by circumstance of being a bureaucracy-centered only capital city, so it doesn't have to do the other functions of organically growing cities, like have industry or have a lot of poor and uneducated people, which will drag down your averages in obvious ways. And I should say, I see those as negatives to not have those things. But when you're measuring in your broad brush sweeping of averages, okay, it's got a really high income. It's also it's got a huge amount of money because it's the designated capital of one of the richest countries in the history of human civilization. So it's going to do well on a bunch of frontiers. But the things that they don't measure in these are things like, can you get lunch in Dixon on a Monday? The answer is no. Almost everywhere is closed. And eating lunch is, for me, it's not just it's nice and a basic requirement. No, it's a spiritual thing to be able to go out and have a good lunch. And for me, in the type of work that I did when I was living in Canberra, I would always be looking for somewhere to eat lunch on a Monday and keep finding the same problem. And it sucked, because it's not a problem that you would find in, a city that had you wouldn't find that problem in Kuala Lumpur or whatever. And you could probably find a far superior lunch for a far lower price. This isn't the Canberra versus KL competition, though. This is like, it's even higher stakes, because we're looking at what the best cities in the world are. And as I said, these competitions have always shitted me off, because I remember the most famous one is the livability one. And that's, I think it's the Economist unit or something like that. I'm not sure if they're attached to the Economist magazine, or again, if it's just one of those names. But the International Economist unit, whatever, nerds. And I dug into the metrics when Melbourne won most livable city ahead of Vienna a few years ago. They sort of go back and forth between those two. I think Vancouver's often up there. And in that, Melbourne and Sydney were both, I think, in the top 10, and they both got, for public transport, if you've been to Melbourne or Sydney, think of in your head what you would give them for public transport out of 100. They both got 100. Which is insane. I'm just 100% certain you could go to a mid-tier Chinese city and experience superior public transport, or any European city west of Bucharest will have a superior public transport experience. I feel like they just like Google, does Sydney have a train? Yes. Does it have a bus? Yes. Does it have light rail? Yes. Wow, it must have everything. But of course, if you try and get anywhere in these megatropolises that are like 100 kilometers plus from end to end, you kind of have to have a car, which also makes the city suck, and also is not something that's measured. They don't look at how many cars there are, which, in your day-to-day lived experience, you're probably better off being poor in a medieval hilltop or Tuscan village and being able to walk to your school, being able to walk to work, being able to know everybody that's around you. Like all these things that just don't get measured at all. And another one that Canberra suffers for, not to its not to insult it, but one of the prime experiences that you can have in life is to live near your friends and family. Canberra's great for living near your friends, potentially. It used to be. It's a bit hard now because it's so expensive. So it sort of gets stratified based on how rich people are, which sucks. And because of the large property sizes, generally, you have to go quite a way to get to a different tier of property. Is that true? Sort of. It's true. It's true enough. If you grew up in Yarralumla, you're not around poor people. And family, living near your family is something that's great. And because most people move to Canberra from somewhere else and most people who grow up in Canberra leave, I think it's a painful part of the standard Canberra experience to not have everybody that you would like in your life day to day. Even though it is still superior, I think, to Sydney, Melbourne, because you could live in Fitzroy or Marrickville and it probably takes you 30 minutes to drive 2 suburbs over. So it's you don't really share the city with the people you share it with. It's still not the same as living in any number of cities you could think of in the world that include everybody at the same time. Even like mid-sized American cities that may not be great, it still may not be great for a lot of things. They would still have the possibility for everybody to live there regardless of their income. In fact, that was one really striking thing for me in Oakland. You could walk 500 meters and literally you're going from, sort of San Andreas boarded up houses, getting shot at things like nightly gunshots, to white picket fence, someone's painting in the garden and there's an open house. Like it's surreal, the sort of genuine diversity in a place like that. And was like, as an Australian, something I'd never seen before, even in having grown up in Melbourne. Well, also Canberra has really, really good starting conditions in that it's really beautiful, like the physical landscape. And not just that, they actually worked really hard. Cashews have a song about it, about Western planting all these 2 million trees. I haven't done the homework, but I assume it's true. And, if you live in Canberra or have been there, you will note that it's more, you're more in the bush than you are in the bush cities of Australia. It's just gorgeous. There's natural life everywhere. There's birds, trees, and silence, stars. It's got stuff that plenty of places in the world don't have, which make it great. But that, apart from those sort of starting conditions, the Griffin Plan intended for 25,000 people to live in Canberra between what I guess is now maybe 15% of the city. So it expanded into these satellite areas, and every decision, I would say, has made it worse, which is pretty damning for the people that live there and their political leadership. So the decision to expand into Belco, okay, that's, it's taken a while to come in. It's actually really beautiful because of the era that houses were built and there's plenty of bush and parkland or whatever. Still entirely car dependent and, mall centres and things like that. So it's not very nice. And then they pushed out into Tuggeranong, which, again, a naturally beautiful place ringed by the mountains, but not very interesting and far away. So again, you couldn't plausibly live much of a life without a car there. And then Gungahlin, which is just like, there's nice elements to it, but as an aggregate, to think that would be part of the highest quality of life place in the world is laughable, because there's like an ugliness to contemporary development where design sort of converges around the least risk-based things and the cheapest quality product that you can get away with selling. That means that it's sort of, even if, I'm sure you can have a really nice life there, but to compare that to Basel in Switzerland, or to compare that to, anywhere, really almost anywhere. It's hard for me to think that it would be superior to equivalent income banded places kind of anywhere in the world. That's not fair. But it is shit in its own special way. And then the infill of Civic is even worse for that phenomenon. Like Northbourne Avenue, the main boulevard into the city, is lined with apartments that used to be public housing. That, they would sort of, okay, they had all the issues that medium density public housing can have, and but they're still, I thought, beautiful buildings, and they've sort of been knocked down. And now you've got a tram line down the light rail line down the center of a town where you can go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stops, completely ringed by dense accommodation, and you couldn't get a sandwich like at any of those stops, really. Or you couldn't get, like, you certainly couldn't shop for your day or anything. And so few places to like go for recreation. It's just shit. It's just that they've handed the place over to property developers, and it's really funny to me. I live in Hungary now, which has issues with corruption, and even heavier than the issues, I would say, is the perception. It's bad, but the perception is even more negative. And so people talk to me about it all the time. And for some reason, in places like Australia, when exactly equivalent things happen or worse things happen, they're not seen as corruption. They're just seen as like failures of the regular course of business. There's so many instances in Canberra of developers uh, getting cheap land from the government that was public housing, knocking down the housing, building something new with the commitment that they have, say, 15, 20% of the new stuff be cheap or low income housing or public housing. And then they make it zero. And then there's zero consequences other than the fact that they make a shitload of money and then, I don't know, do cocaine in the increasingly ugly businesses that represent life there. Yeah. I don't want to be too negative. Have I been too negative? Because I actually really love Canberra, and this is another thing. If I could afford to, I would probably live there, but I can't afford to because living an unorthodox life is not an option. So it's kind of funny to declare it as a high quality of life place. Yes, okay, it's because it's all contained in the one thing. If you were to draw a circle around, I don't know America well enough, like the Hamptons or Davos in Switzerland, and say, actually, there's a really high quality of life here. Everyone would be like, yeah, no shit. It's full of people that have $1 million. Like, of course, it's going to be a higher quality of life than, regional Peru or whatever. But yes, it's that collective aggregating that I just generally have an issue with in terms of understanding things, because the temptation is to think, oh, this is the list of the places that would be the best to live generally. But of course, it's, as I said at the start, it's about who you are, not about the average. You're not average. You're great.